I never thought a single night could change the course of my life, but it did. That night, I lay across the back seat of my old Honda Civic, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how I had ended up here, homeless, jobless, nothing but a worn backpack and a car that smelled faintly of old fast food. It all began when I lost the job I had spent 5 years building. "We're letting you go." Those words hit harder than anything I'd ever felt. That job had been my security, my identity, my routine, and, suddenly, it was gone. Within days, the eviction notice arrived. My apartment, the place I had called home, was no longer mine. Packing up my life into cardboard boxes, I realized I had nowhere to turn, no safety net, and no place to sleep. That first night in my car was brutal. Every sound outside seemed amplified, the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking in the alley, neighbors laughing through their windows. I felt exposed, ashamed, utterly alone. The fear wasn't just about sleeping in a car. It was the crushing realization that everything I had relied on could vanish in an instant. Days blurred into a relentless grind of survival. I showered at gyms, scavenged cheap meals from convenience stores, and carried my life in a backpack I never let out of reach. Every morning, I forced myself to look presentable, comb my hair, dress neatly, and face the world with a calm exterior. No one could know the truth, that I was sleeping in a car, scraping by, barely surviving. I applied for every job I could find: warehouse work, retail, delivery, freelance gigs. Rejection became routine. Each were going with someone else, cut a little deeper than the last. Slowly, though, I discovered something vital. Survival wasn't about luck, it was about discipline. I began tracking every dollar, every opportunity, every small victory. My car became my classroom, teaching me lessons in budgeting, patience, and resilience. Nights were the hardest, wrapped in a thin blanket, watching headlights pass by. I imagined families asleep in warm beds and wondered if I would ever know that comfort again. And yet, in the quiet hours before dawn, something inside me shifted. I realized I had a choice. I could let this destroy me, or I could let it teach me. That night, staring at the dim glow of a street lamp through the windshield, I made a silent promise. I would survive. I would fight. I would rise. I would turn this car the very place of my lowest point into the starting line of a life I hadn't yet imagined. Little did I know, the very next step I took would launch a journey that would carry me from homelessness to financial freedom. I learned quickly that surviving in a car wasn't about comfort, it was about strategy. Every day became a test of how much I could endure, how disciplined I could be, and how far I was willing to go to claw my way out. The backseat of my Honda had become my headquarters, my office, my war room. I started waking up at 5 a.m., brushing my teeth in gym locker rooms, grabbing a quick breakfast from a gas station, and plotting my day. Every hour counted. Every opportunity mattered. I applied for every job I could find, no matter how small or menial. Delivery driving, warehouse labor, retail shifts, even freelancing online. I said yes to anything that kept me moving forward. I learned to wear a mask of composure and confidence, hiding the truth that I was homeless. Each rejection stung, but I refused to stop. Slowly, I discovered the power of consistency. Every no brought me closer to a yes, and every shift I survived in my car strengthened my resilience. I began treating my life like a business. I tracked every dollar I earned, every mile I drove, every interview I attended. I planned meals, gas stops, and showers like a military operation. I knew that wasting a single day could mean sliding further into a trap I might never escape. Discipline became my survival tool. Hard work became my weapon. But survival alone wasn't enough. Needed to think bigger. In the quiet hours, parked in empty lots, I devoured articles about entrepreneurship, watched videos about investments, and studied the habits of self-made millionaires. I realized climbing out of homelessness required more than hard work. It required a mindset shift. I needed to see myself not as a victim, but as someone capable of creating opportunities where none seemed to exist. One day, after yet another rejection, I sat in the driver's seat and made a decision. I would no longer wait for someone to hand me a chance. I would build my own. I started researching small business ideas I could launch with almost no capital, learning everything I could from free resources at libraries and online forums. My nights in the car were no longer just for sleeping. They became my brainstorming sessions, my planning hours, my strategy meetings with myself. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was the doubt. Every night, as the city slept, I faced the voice in my head that whispered I wasn't good enough, that I had failed, that this car was my life now. But every morning, I answered with action. Another job application, another delivery, another hour of learning. Slowly, I began to feel the shift. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing. Preparing for the moment I would stop chasing survival and start chasing freedom. Then, one day, a small breakthrough came. Not money, not a big opportunity, just a tiny step that validated everything I had been doing. It was a spark, a glimmer of hope, a hint that this relentless hustle might actually lead somewhere. But that spark also came with a question I didn't yet have the answer to. Could I turn this small flicker into a flame that would guide me out of homelessness and into the financial life I had only ever dreamed of? Some nights, I would sit in the dark, parked in a quiet corner, and imagine a life I had no right to dream of. Not just a life without fear, a life without hunger, but a life where money and freedom weren't distant fantasies, they were real. And then, one morning, after months of relentless hustle, that imagination collided with reality in the smallest, yet most powerful, way. It started with an idea that seemed almost ridiculous at first. I noticed a demand in my city for small online services I could do with little money, no storefront, just a computer and some creativity. I spent nights in my car researching, reading every blog, every forum, learning how people turned simple ideas into profitable businesses. The work was exhausting, but electrifying. For the first time, I wasn't just chasing survival, I was chasing growth. I invested every spare dollar I had into that idea. A laptop from a pawn shop, a slow but usable internet connection, and a subscription to a basic online platform. Everything else came from discipline, persistence, and long nights, strategizing while parked in quiet lots. Failure was inevitably new, but quitting wasn't an option. This was my first real shot at escaping the life that had trapped me in a car. The first few weeks were brutal. Nothing went as planned. Clients ignored emails. Projects fell through. I questioned whether I had deluded myself, whether homelessness had broken me in ways I couldn't fix. But then I remembered the nights in that car, the cold, the hunger, the fear. I reminded myself that I had survived worse, and that discipline and hard work always paid off eventually. Then it happened, small win. One client, one project, a modest payment. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that I could create value, that my ideas weren't worthless, that the person sleeping in a car could still build something meaningful. That tiny success became fuel. Every rejection, every failure, every sleepless night suddenly had purpose. I began scaling slowly, learning how to communicate better, deliver faster, and manage my limited resources. Living in my car transformed. It became less about desperation and more about focus. Every quiet moment in that back seat was an opportunity to plan, strategize, and prepare for the next step. Discipline wasn't just survival. Anymore, it was the foundation of a business mindset. I started visualizing where I wanted to be in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. Every small decision, every dollar, every hour became part of a larger vision. And yet, just as things began to shift, I hit a wall. My first attempt at scaling the business failed spectacularly. I had overextended, underestimated costs, mismanaged client expectations. For a moment, fear returned, the fear that I would fail again, that the car would remain my home forever. But this time, I didn't let it break me. I had learned that failure wasn't defeat, it was a lesson, a blueprint for improvement. That night, lying in the back seat, I realized something critical. The journey from sleeping in a car to building wealth wouldn't be instant. It wouldn't be easy. But I had tasted the first spark of success, and that spark was enough to keep me going. The next step, the real breakthrough, that would set me on the path to multi-millionaire status was closer than I thought. The hardest part of building something from nothing is realizing that growth is never simple. Success doesn't arrive as a single moment, it creeps in through countless small, brutal decisions, each one testing your patience, your discipline, and your resilience. For me, that meant turning the tiny spark of my first business win into something that could actually change my life. I had survived the car. I had hustled for survival. I had tasted my first victory. But scaling a business while living in a car was an entirely different challenge. Every step forward demanded more energy, more planning, more risk. I started taking on bigger projects, working longer hours, and learning skills I never imagined I could master. Marketing, negotiation, client management, all of it became critical. Mistakes were expensive, and sleep was a luxury I couldn't always afford. Some days, I worked 16 hours straight, mornings in the gym to clean up, hours in coffee shops answering emails, afternoons running deliveries to supplement income, and nights parked in empty lots plotting strategy. Living in a car taught me efficiency like nothing else could. I learned to do more with less time, less money, less comfort, and to extract every ounce of potential from every opportunity. Not everything went smoothly. I lost clients because I mismanaged cash flow and worried that a single mistake could send me back to square one. Nights came when I lay in my car, feeling the weight of failure pressing down, wondering if I had bitten off more than I could handle. But I refused to quit. I had faced worse cold nights, hunger, loneliness, and this was just another challenge to overcome. I began to see patterns in the chaos. Systems, processes, and discipline were more powerful than raw effort alone. I automated what I could, delegated small tasks, and focused on high-impact actions. My mindset shifted from merely surviving to strategically building. Every small improvement compounded, turning weeks of grinding into measurable growth. I realized that this was the turning point. My car wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a symbol of everything I was willing to endure to create something lasting. Slowly, the results began to show. Revenue increased, clients returned, and word of mouth brought opportunities I hadn't imagined. Each milestone, no matter how small, felt monumental because I knew the nights I had endured to reach them. Every dollar earned was a victory over fear, over rejection, over the hopelessness I had once felt sleeping in that back seat. And yet, even as things began to change, I knew the real test was still ahead. Scaling meant bigger risks, heavier responsibility, and decisions that could either catapult me forward or send me tumbling back into the darkness. One major opportunity was coming, one that could define the future of my business, and I didn't yet know if I was ready for it. That night, parked under the dim glow of a street, unrolling my thin blanket, I realized surviving the car was no longer enough. Now, it was about mastering the grind, trusting my discipline, and preparing for the moment that would finally separate me from the life I had once known, and that moment was closer than I thought. There comes a moment in every journey when struggle stops. Defining you and results begin speaking for themselves. For me, that moment didn't arrive with a single client or paycheck. It came slowly, like dawn breaking over a long, dark night. The hours in my car, the endless hustle, the rejections, the nights spent wondering if I'd ever escape it, was all starting to pay off. I had finally learned how to run a business efficiently. The small wins from those early days became consistent revenue. I hired my first assistant, delegated projects off my own shoulders, and focused on scaling strategically. I was no longer surviving day to day. I was building a life I had only imagined during the darkest nights in my Honda Civic. Every new client, every referral, every milestone reminded me that persistence and discipline were more powerful than talent alone. With my finances stabilizing, I began reclaiming pieces of life I had thought were lost. I rented a small apartment, cooked my own meals again, and slept in a real bed. But the mental transformation mattered even more than the physical. I had gone from someone who feared rejection, hiding in the backseat of a car, to someone who believed in the power of vision, action, and relentless discipline. I was no longer defined by circumstance, I was defining it. I started investing in myself. Seminars, books, studying the habits of self-made millionaires became routine. I learned about financial strategy, marketing, leadership. The more I learned, the more opportunities appeared. I wasn't just running a business, I was building an ecosystem, creating multiple streams of income that made financial freedom inevitable. And yet, the transformation wasn't just about money. It was about mindset. The fear that had once kept me frozen, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of sleeping in a car again became fuel. Discipline, courage, and consistency mattered far more than luck. Every rejection, every cold night, every lonely hour in that back seat had been preparing me for this. I had been training for success while the world slept. By now, my small business was generating serious revenue, enough not only to cover living expenses, but to invest, expand, and innovate. I began dreaming bigger, setting goals that once seemed impossible. Each milestone built momentum, and momentum became unstoppable. The man who once counted coins in a back seat now planned investments, partnerships, and expansions that would completely transform his life. And yet, just as I began tasting true freedom, I realized something important. Transformation isn't a single moment. It isn't just signing a check, landing a client, or moving out of a car. True transformation is ongoing. It's the ability to keep growing, to keep building, and to keep pushing past every limit. Ahead of me lay the ultimate test, turning everything I had built into real wealth, into multi-millionaire status. That night, lying in my new apartment bed, I thought about the car I had once called home. Every hardship, every rejection, every sleepless night had led to this point. But I knew the story wasn't over. The final chapter, the chapter that would carry me from financial stability to multimillionaire, reality was just beginning. I still remember the moment I looked at my bank account and realized I had officially reached 7 figures. Sitting in a sleek office I could finally call my own. I thought about that Honda Civic, the back seat where I had once slept, shivering and afraid. The contrast was surreal. From the darkest nights of hunger and rejection to the brightest mornings of freedom and accomplishment. This was the reward for every ounce of grit, every failure endured, every lesson learned. Becoming a multimillionaire didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of relentless effort, discipline, and belief in something bigger than myself. The jobs I took just to survive. The nights spent planning in parking lots. The small victories that once seemed insignificant, they all compounded, teaching me that wealth is built in the shadows, away from recognition. Through consistent, intentional action, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Money is a byproduct of value and persistence. My first client, who had once entrusted me with a tiny project, eventually became a long-term partner. Referrals multiplied. Projects scaled. Investments compounded. Every decision, every calculated risk, became a stepping stone to a life I had once only dreamed about. But the transformation wasn't just financial. It was personal. I became more disciplined, more resilient, more strategic. Fear no longer controlled me. I learned to use it as fuel. The man who had once slept in a car had grown into someone who could create opportunities, solve problems, and lead a business successfully. I also learned to give back. I began mentoring others facing homelessness or financial struggle, sharing the principles that carried me from the backseat of my car to my first million. The lessons were simple but powerful. Discipline over comfort. Persistence over fear. Action over doubt. True success, I realized, is not just about wealth, it's about impact, legacy, and inspiring others to believe they can change their lives too. Looking back, every hardship, every lonely night, every moment of doubt was necessary. They were the crucible that forged my mindset, the foundation on which my wealth and freedom were built. Sleeping in my car wasn't just a dark period of my life. It was the training ground for the life I now lead. And the man I once was, struggling to survive, would be proud of the man I became. Today, I live with clarity, purpose, and gratitude. I wake up excited not just because of financial security, but because I understand what it took to get here. Every challenge faced in the backseat of that Honda taught me lessons no school, no job, no mentor could provide. From homeless to multimillionaire, I learned that success isn't a gift, it's earned. Step by step, night by night, in the moments no one sees. And as I reflect on that journey, one thing is clear. The car didn't hold me back, it launched me. Every setback, every struggle, every rejection was preparation for greatness. And for anyone listening, remember this. No matter how low you are, no matter how dark the nights, your life can change if you fight, adapt, and never stop believing in what's possible.